Imagine finally selling your house. You've negotiated the price, you've packed all your boxes, the moving truck is literally idling outside.
Yeah, you ready to go?
Right. And then you are told you can't actually hand over the keys until you go wait in line at the DMD.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right?
it does.
But if you are trying to sell a very specific type of home, that bureaucratic nightmare is just your reality.
It really is, and it completely shatters the illusion of the standard real estate playbook.
Yeah.
We're so conditioned to think that selling a house just involves a realtor, an appraisal, a title company, and then a signed deed.
Yeah, standard stuff.
Exactly. But it's not always like that.
No, it's not. And the materials we're diving into today prove that assumption completely wrong. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are looking at this stack of insights provided by a real estate solutions firm called Sarasota Sell House Fast Buyer.
Right.
And these documents, they're dated April 2026, and they basically pull back the curtain on the surprisingly intricate and honestly sometimes entirely baffling world of selling modal and manufactured homes.
It really is a totally different world.
It is. So our mission today is to figure out the hidden mechanics of this market, because once you scratch the surface, you realize it is definitely not as simple as just sticking a for sale sign in the grass.
No, definitely not. And to even begin to understand why this process is so complex, we really have to look at the geography that drives the demand.
Okay, let's unpack this. Geography.
Yeah, because the location itself kind of creates this mirage of standard home ownership. So the materials focus heavily on Sarasota, Florida.
Which is gorgeous.
Oh, it's a massive draw, right? You have this constant influx of seasonal residents.
Huh.
You've got retirees flocking to 55-plus communities and just year-round locals who are desperately looking for affordable coastal living.
Right. I mean, Sarasota is prime territory. You have the proximity to the Gulf of Mexico, vibrant cultural districts, incredible weather.
Exactly. Which keeps the demand for well-maintained manufactured housing consistently high. People just want to live there.
Yeah.
And within these specific mobile home communities, things like premium park amenities,
Like what?
well, say a newly renovated clubhouse or pickleball courts or exclusive pool access, those things significantly boost the valuation of the property.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, so it looks and feels just like a traditional suburban neighborhood.
It sounds totally idyllic. I mean, you buy a nice manufactured home, you have a pool, you are near the Gulf, you're basically living the dream.
You'd think so, yeah.
But looking through these notes, the setting is actually a massive trap for the uninformed buyer.
It really can be.
Because owning a mobile home on leased land, it's a bit like buying a luxury yacht, but you're being forced to rent the marina slip.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, like the structure itself, the walls, the roof, the appliances, that is yours, but the dirt beneath it, the actual earth.
Yeah, that belongs to a corporate landlord. And that distinction between the physical structure and the dirt, it dictates absolutely everything about the home's value, its legal status, and, well, how it can eventually be sold.
Wow, everything.
Pretty much. If you own the land beneath the unit, the property yields a much higher price point because it functions much closer to traditional real estate.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if the land is leased, which is, it's the dominant model in these managed Florida communities, the financial equation completely shifts.
Because a buyer isn't just purchasing a house, they're basically taking on a permanent monthly liability just to keep the house from being evicted.
Precisely. Any potential buyer has to calculate the monthly carrying costs of that lot rent, plus the park fees, plus whatever homeowners association dues are in place.
Right.
And they have to factor all of that right into their initial offer. And in places like Sarasota, that lot rent can be incredibly steep.
I can imagine.
So a buyer is evaluating the total long-term cost of ownership, not just the sticker price of the physical structure. The dirt, ironically, is what dictates the terms of the deal for the box sitting on top of it.
That is wild. But okay, so since a buyer has to factor in that hefty lot rent, that obviously limits who can actually afford to live there.
Definitely.
But let's say you find a buyer who is totally fine with the lot rent, they love the community. You would assume the physical structure itself should be pretty straightforward to appraise and finance, right? Like a house is a house.
You would think so, but no.
Right, because I'm looking at this specific date in the materials, June 1976.
Ah, yes.
Why is this specific month causing buyers' mortgages to just blow up at the last minute?
Well, what's fascinating here is that date is basically the ultimate dividing line in the manufactured housing world.
Okay.
In June 1976, the Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD, They implemented strict modern safety standards for all manufactured housing.
Wait, what was happening before 1976 that forced the government to step in?
Well, prior to that date, the industry was largely unregulated. I mean, you had mobile homes being built with aluminum wiring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was a massive fire hazard. You had units without proper egress windows for emergency escapes, insufficient insulation, and structural framing that just could not withstand high winds.
Which is obviously a critical issue in a hurricane-prone state like Florida.
Exactly. So HUD stepped in and said, from this day forward, every unit must meet these baseline safety and construction codes.
So it is just a hard cutoff. If a unit was built in, say, May 1976, it doesn't get the HUD seal of approval.
Nope. And because of that regulatory reality, traditional bank financing is nearly impossible to obtain for those older units.
Wait, really? And nearly impossible?
Yeah. From a bank's perspective, a pre-1976 mobile home is just a toxic asset. The underwriters look at the lack of a HUD tag, and they see structural liability, fire risk, and something that will be nearly impossible to insure properly.
So it's kind of like finding a beautifully restored vintage 1970 muscle car. Like, sure, the seller might have put in brand new leather seats and a custom paint job, and it looks amazing in the driveway.
Right.
But when you try to get a standard comprehensive insurance policy on it, the underwriter looks at the lack of airbags, the lack of anti-lock brakes, no crumple zones.
Oh, yeah.
And they just laugh you out of the room.
Yeah.
The risk profile is just way too high for standard corporate underwriting.
That is a very accurate way to look at it, actually.
Yeah.
Retail buyers face incredibly strict underwriting guidelines for these properties.
Shane.
I mean, a buyer might fall in love with a vintage mobile home, put in an offer, and get all the way to like day 45 of a 60-day closing process.
Oh, that's so worse.
The seller is literally packing their bags, and then, at the 11th hour, a bank underwriter finally flags the manufacturing date and just pulls the plug on the mortgage.
That is devastating for a seller. I mean, your life is in boxes. You might have already put a down payment on your next place, and suddenly you're back to square one just because of a rule from 50 years ago.
Right. And this is exactly why direct cash investors become the only viable exit strategy for many sellers of these older properties.
Ah, because they don't need a mortgage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A cash purchaser bypasses the bank approvals entirely.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need a corporate underwriter to sign off on the HUD tag.
Right.
They look at the intrinsic value of the structure, the desirability of the Sarasota location, and they just use their own private capital.
Okay, so cash buyers step in when the banks step out. That solves the financing trap.
It does.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because the part of this document that actually made me do a double take was the legal paperwork.
Oh, the paperwork is a whole other thing.
Right, because even if you have a buyer standing there with a briefcase full of cash, you still can't just sign a standard real estate deed.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You're stepping out of the realm of real estate law and into a completely different bureaucratic maze.
And this goes back to my first point in the intro, the DMV. To sell a home, I mean, I have sold used cars before, and waiting at the Department of Motor Vehicles is miserable enough for a Honda Civic.
Oh, absolutely.
Doing it for a 3-bedroom house just bends the mind.
It really comes down to how the property is legally classified by the state of Florida.
Okay, how so?
Well, if the mobile home is permanently affixed to land that you actually own, it can often be classified and taxed as real property, just like a standard site-built house.
Okay, so normal real estate.
Right. In that case, the transaction goes through the county clerk's office with a traditional deed.
But if it is on leased land in one of these Sarasota parks, well, I guess, I mean, if you're renting the dirt.
Yes, then the state typically classifies it as tangible personal property.
Personal property, like a couch or a car.
Exactly like a car. Historically, these units had wheels and axles, right? They were designed to be transported on highways, so the state legally treats them more like a vehicle than a building.
That is crazy.
And that means the legal transfer of title happens via a certificate of title managed by the DMV.
Okay, but you still have the landlord to deal with, right? Like, you own the vehicle, but they own the parking spot.
Yep.
So I imagine handing over the DMV title is really only half the battle.
Oh, it is often the easiest half.
Really?
Yeah, the real hurdle is that the seller must secure explicit approval from the park management to transfer the lot lease.
Okay.
The park manager isn't just a passive landlord collecting rent, you know. They are the ultimate gatekeepers to the community. They have unilateral veto power over your buyer.
Wait, how does that actually play out? Because it sounds incredibly restrictive. I mean, if I own the home, shouldn't I be able to sell it to whomever I want?
Well, technically you can sell the physical structure to anyone, but the buyer cannot keep the structure in the park without a lease.
Ah, got it.
And park management requires any prospective buyer to pass extensive background checks, credit checks, and income verification. Yeah, they are protecting the financial stability and the culture of their community. If your cash buyer has a recent bankruptcy or a criminal record, or even just a credit score that falls 10 points below the park's arbitrary minimum.
The management will deny their lease application.
Exactly. So the sale dies instantly.
Man. So a seller is essentially held hostage by the park's approval process.
That's a good way to phrase it. You could have a buyer willing to pay above asking price, but if the park manager doesn't like them, or if the park manager is simply just slow to process the paperwork, the home just sits in limbo.
And during that entire limbo period, the seller is still legally on the hook for the monthly lot rent.
Right, they still have to pay.
So what does this all mean for the seller? I mean, if a traditional listing is a massive gamble because of the 1976 HUD financing rules, and you are constantly at the mercy of a park manager's background checks, it just seems like sellers are completely trapped.
It can feel that way.
Do they just have to throw their hands up and take whatever lowball cash offer comes their way?
Well, they don't have to, but they do have to make a very calculated decision about what they value more: time, certainty, or maximum profit.
Right.
The source data actually outlines 4 distinct paths to liquidate these assets, and each path represents a different trade-off.
Okay, this is the classic seller's dilemma. So let's look at the first option the data mentions, the traditional listing with a real estate agent. So you're paying that standard 5% to 6% commission fee.
Right. This is the path people choose when they want to squeeze every last dollar of equity out of the property.
Sure.
The data indicates this takes about 60 to 90 days on average to close.
Okay.
But as we discussed, the financing risk is astronomically high for older units. So this path is really only a safe bet for owners with newly built post-1976 units that are in pristine condition and preferably on owned land.
Right. Right. Then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is going direct to a cash buyer, like the investment firm that provided these insights.
Exactly. The cash buyer route drops the timeline dramatically to just 7 to 14 days.
Wow. That's fast.
It is. There are no agent commissions, and the financing risk drops to absolute zero.
Because it's cash.
Yes. The trade-off, though, is that you are selling at a wholesale price. You are leaving some potential equity on the table in exchange for speed and a guaranteed close.
And they buy it as is, right?
Completely as is.
So if the roof is leaking or, the 1980s carpets are totally stained, the seller doesn't have to spend a single dime fixing it up before they leave.
Right. The investor absorbs the responsibility for all renovations and deep cleaning.
Okay.
Then you have a third option, which is a park management buyback.
Oh, where the park itself buys it.
Yeah, some of these larger corporate parks will offer to purchase the unit back from the resident.
I mean, that seems convenient, but I imagine the park isn't going to offer top dollar.
No, they rarely do.
Yeah.
The timeline here is usually 30 to 45 days. It's a very low-risk option, and it is highly convenient because the park already owns the land.
Oh, right. So you bypass a lot of the bureaucratic friction.
Exactly. But you have to remember, the park's goal is to acquire the unit cheaply, renovate it, and flip it to a new resident.
Naturally.
Yeah.
And then the final option outlined here is for sale by owner, which honestly just sounds like a recipe for a massive migraine.
Oh, it is the most labor-intensive path by far. The timeline often stretches well beyond 90 days.
Wow.
I mean, sure, you save the 6% agent commission, but you take on the burden of marketing the property, fielding calls from completely unqualified buyers, hosting private tours on your weekends.
Ugh, no thank you.
And on top of all that, navigating the DMV title transfers and park approval paperwork entirely on your own.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. So when we look at these different paths, it really comes down to what kind of crisis the seller is facing, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because people don't usually sell their homes in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Life throws curveballs. I am thinking about like a sudden job relocation across the country where you have to be in Seattle by the first of the month.
Right.
Or maybe a couple navigating a really difficult divorce.
And that is exactly where understanding these mechanics becomes crucial. Property transitions almost always coincide with significant, often very stressful life adjustments.
Definitely.
Let's take your example of a divorce. In those situations, shared assets must be divided, but the longer it takes to liquidate that asset, the longer the emotional distress is prolonged.
Yeah, absolutely. If a divorcing couple chooses a traditional listing, hoping to get an extra $10,000, they are stuck with each other for 3 months.
Yes, they are.
They have to argue over who pays for the plumbing repairs before the open house, who keeps the living room vacuumed for showings, and who is paying that hefty lot rent every single month while it just sits on the market.
And if they have an older unit, they might go through all of that fighting, only to have the buyer's financing denied on day 60.
Oh, that would be a nightmare.
It happens. This is why a direct cash buyer often becomes the preferred route in highly emotional or time-sensitive circumstances. It just provides a clean, immediate break.
Right, because the cash purchaser just steps in and takes over the headache.
They do. They handle the specialized DMV paperwork. They have the local expertise to communicate efficiently with the Sarasota park managers to push those lease transfers through, and they disperse the funds in a matter of days.
Wow.
It allows all parties to liquidate the shared asset swiftly and just transition to their next chapter without those lingering financial and logistical ties.
So it basically trades that maximum market value for absolute certainty and speed.
Exactly. And depending on the life event you are facing, certainty might be a far more valuable currency than equity.
That makes total sense. So as we wrap this up, whether you are actively trying to navigate the Southwest Florida real estate market or you are just someone fascinated by the hidden mechanics of property law, I think this deep dive really proves that the definition of home is far more complicated than it appears on the surface.
It definitely is.
We are taught to think of real estate as just, bricks, mortar, and a white picket fence. But the reality is a tangled web of land leases, manufacturing dates, and local bureaucracies.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights the immense value of critical thinking when approaching any complex system.
Yes, absolutely.
If you just follow the standard playbook without understanding the underlying mechanics, you will get crushed by the nuances.
Yeah.
Understanding why a market functions the way it does. Why the DMV is involved in a housing transaction, why the park manager holds all the leverage, why 1976 is a magic number that knowledge cuts through the noise.
It really does.
It saves time, it
Yep.
saves money, and it drastically reduces stress when you're trying to make a major life decision in a world of information overload.
You just have to know the actual rules of the specific game you are playing, not just the general rules of the sport.
Exactly. Well said.
So we have talked a lot today about the illusion of standard homeownership when you don't actually own the ground beneath your feet. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. If the legal definition of your home can shift so drastically, from real estate to merely personal property, waiting in line at the DMV, purely based on whether or not you hold the deed to the dirt underneath it, how might the increasing scarcity of desirable coastal land fundamentally reshape what it actually means to be a homeowner in the decades to come?